Understanding the point of pilots helps us understand how we need to communicate the results to stakeholders. This is not an academic process. We're not trying to do a lab-controlled study where we're looking only at a single pressure at a time to validate our understanding of how the world works so that we can publish it out. We're not going to write 20-page papers with a bunch of different experiments with 1 million citations in them. What we are trying to do is, in plain language, so it's comparable across pilots, communicate a set of options that a stakeholder can choose from. So the way that we do that is by creating something called an outcome statement. It's really the corollary of the behavioral statement. So the behavioral statement is where we want to end up. The outcome statement is how do we do about getting there. So we usually use a format, something like we are some level of confidence that an intervention changed behavior in some direction, either increased or decreased a behavior as measured by data. Now, behavior and data, we already have those. They came from the behavioral statement. So this is just a restatement of, hey, here's what we're trying to get to. We're trying to increase a behavior as measured this way. We're trying to decrease a behavior as measured this way. Then there are two more pieces of the outcome statement. We need to talk about scaling. We need to say scaling this requires some level of effort and will result in some level of impact. Why is this important? Because this is just a cost-benefit ratio. It's telling our stakeholders, hey, here's really the cost of doing this. It's going to cost X number of dollars per person, etc. And here's what you're going to get because of it. Here's the impact. This cost-benefit ratio is a huge part of how decision makers are making their choices about how we're going to scale things and what things are going to go on. Let's go through those variables one at a time. So first up, we have confidence. Confidence is just a plain language version of our p-value, right? So for those of you that are statisticians, p-value is a statistical measure of how certain we are that something that we observed is generalizably true, as opposed to just, a statistical anomaly, something that happens only some of the time or unpredictably. In general, p-values range from 0 to 1, right? 1 would mean, hey, it's absolutely totally random, that the result of our thing, if we intervened, it didn't seem to do anything at all. It didn't increase or decrease in any definable pattern. It was totally random. You never really see that. 0 would mean we were perfectly sure that when A, B, and every single time when A, B, right, the correlation was perfect all of the time. And then the numbers in between tell us sort of the degree to which we're lying between those endpoints. So for example, in academia, we typically use p less than 0.05. What does that mean? Well, it means we're 95% confident that what we've observed is generalizably true, and there's about a 5% chance that what we're seeing is some sort of anomaly, something outside of what we might think of as the standard. Now look, this is not a stats class. We go way deeper into that, and as with any generalization, there are technical inaccuracies in there, but it's good enough for your understanding of what we're trying to do here. Now, we're not generally going to give a p-value to our stakeholders because you'd have to explain everything I just said, and then they'd have to internalize it, and they'd have to be right about how they internalized it. It's much easier to simply use plain language. We're somewhat confident, very confident, not at all confident. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to say. We're confident about this. We're very confident about that. That's what we're really looking for in this confidence variable, is something that helps your stakeholder decide how to make this decision. Now, you don't always have to be perfectly confident. It interacts with the other variables. So sometimes I think people feel like, well, if I'm only somewhat confident in something, it means that the stakeholder won't choose it. That's not true. Imagine that you're somewhat confident about something that's incredibly low effort and high impact. One of the things I do when I am interviewing quantitative researchers, because quantitative researchers are usually the people doing the data analysis around validating pilots. One of the things I do when I interview them is I'll give them sort of a problem. I say, hey, I have an intervention that is p.2. P.2. Now, as a reminder, that means there's a 20% chance that what I am seeing as a result is some sort of statistical abnormality, and an 80% chance that what I'm seeing is true. And traditional academically trained quantitative researchers will often say, well, you should do nothing. You should throw that away. There's a 20% chance you're wrong. Because remember, the academic bar is p less than 0.05. That's not what we want, right? I want researchers who recognize the business value of something even when it's uncertain. So I'll frequently then say, well, why don't I give you some more information about this intervention? It's a pill. It's a tiny pill. It melts in your mouth. It costs, 1 penny to produce. It has no known side effects. It tastes wonderful, and it cures all known forms of cancer. Think maybe you might want to do something with that? If there's an 80% chance that everything I just said is true, we might want to take that next step and do a more rigorous pilot. We certainly don't want to just throw it away because you've got something really amazing there. So you can't evaluate confidence outside of effort and impact. I'm just sort of telling you how to talk about it. So don't get dismayed if you find yourself having to say, hey, we're only somewhat confident about that. That's okay. That might still be the intervention you choose to scale. Next up, we're going to do a couple together. Intervention, direction, behavior, and data. The intervention is just plain language what we did. We don't want to go on and on about what the pilot is. It's the intervention that we're proposing, whatever it is we think we should do here. It's not even the why. We can talk about why later. It's just the what. Direction, did I increase the behavior, decrease the behavior, whatever it was that I was trying to do in the original behavioral statement. The behavior is the behavior I'm trying to change. Data is how I agreed to analyze it at the beginning, agreed to measure it at the beginning. Now look, this is not a pre-registered academic study where I have to say at the very beginning, I'm going to measure it this way, and then I stick to that throughout. It might be that you end up changing your behavioral statement somewhere in the middle as you start to recognize strategically that there's something different here going on than what you thought. That's okay. But whatever you agree to as the measure, you want to keep it here. And it doesn't vary between pilots. So if you're piloting 3 different interventions, they all should use the same form of measurement because that allows us to compare between them. Remember, the whole point here is to give an evidence-based menu to your decision makers. And so if you start changing how you're measuring things, that makes it more complex. Imagine a menu in a restaurant where, one of the things is priced in dollars and one of the things is priced in pounds and one of the things is priced in French francs. It becomes very hard for people to evaluate. So the more that you can keep those the same, the better. And that means data should always be the same across all of your outcome statements from the pilots that are related to at least this behavioral statement. Now we get to the really juicy part of an outcome statement, which is the effort and impact. Effort, these change between pilots. Some people often ask, well, how do you express these? It's different for every behavioral statement because, there's different kinds of ways of measuring the cost-benefit ratio of something. Effort can be development time. So it could say, hey, it's going to take us 6 months to build this. It could be a per person cost. Hey, it's going to cost us $3 per person. It could be a blend. It's going to take us 6 months and cost us $3 per person, or cost $10,000 in startup costs and then $3 per person thereafter, right? It's just some idea of what the scaling effort is going to take. And look, you might not know that. You might have to talk to your operational partners, right? Remember our business model, behavioral model, operational model. Hey, this is where that PM might need to go off and talk to the operational partners to really understand, hey, how do we, the range of things. This is not perfectly precise numbering. It's not 27 cents versus 28 cents unless that really makes a big deal in your business. This is, it's orders of magnitude. Is it $1, $100, $1,000, right? It's a vague understanding with the knowledge that, hey, actual cost is going to get worked out in the operational step if we decide that we're going to scale this. It's just helping us compare across sort of pilots. Ditto for impact. It's tough to say, well, here is the universal way of measuring impact because impact relates to the behavioral statement. Maybe it's, I'm going to get twice as much of a behavior. Maybe I'm incrementally going to get just a little bit more of a behavior. Maybe we can translate that into dollars, right? And so as I talk you through some examples later, I'll talk about some of these outcome statements, some of the ways of measuring. The more you can get this to dollars and cents in a business context, often the better it is. You can say, hey, it's going to cost X, and given what we know about the way our business model is constructed, it's going to yield sort of Y. But again, that requires a lot of cross-connection with your business and operational stakeholders. And it also requires a really mature business. You have to know a lot about what things cost at scale and how you tend to make money. So earlier stage businesses, it can be harder and harder to say what the impact of something is and put it in the right sort of financial terms. You might just have to default to the behavior itself. I'm going to get twice as much of the behavior, 20% much of the behavior, that kind of thing.